INISEG, the International Institute for Global Security Studies, has created the INISEG CAST section with the purpose of informing, analyzing, conversing, and discussing in a natural and uncensored way each and every one of the political and social events that happen in society. We are not journalists, but we still believe that we have the power to speak up and educate our audience. Why not deliver a different point of view? No violence, no bad words, no bad intentions. Just be us. We are INISEG CAST, connecting thoughts.
Welcome to all our audience. Every time that we meet together, we have a good purpose. So this time in INISEG CAST, that is a channel for all these relaxed conversation, and try to analyze a little bit about what is happening in the world. We have a very special guest today. And we want to talk with her about a lot of topics, a lot of point of view about what is going on in the United States, first of all, and what is her experience about all this socialism that we are facing right now. Helen Raleigh, she has more than 20 years of experience in the financial service industry. She's the founder of a really important company in the United States, Red Meadow Advisor. And also she's an immigrant that she has shared all the experience about socialism, especially China socialism, that has a strong opinion that we want to hear. And of course, with us also, Joao, that is, like always, a pleasure to have you here, Joao, again.
Thank you, Roxana, my pleasure.
So I think that we will have a very interesting conversation with our guest. So
Definitely.
welcome, Helen. It's really pleasure to have you here. And thank you for that.
Thank you for having me.
Okay, for the beginning, I would like to know you a little bit about your past. I was reading a lot of news and documentaries about your experience in your childhood.
Mm-hmm.
What is your opinion about this socialism system, especially in China, and how you can predict will happen in the rest of the world, especially in the United States, with this new idea about socialism that we are facing now?
Well, thank you for asking me that. I was born and raised in China, so I grew up with socialism. As you know, China didn't start economic reform until in the 1980s. And so prior to that, from the founding of the communist country in 1949 to 1980, China is pretty much a socialist model, no different from the Soviet Union and what's happening in Cuba. And so when you say there's a rising trend of new socialism, there's really no new socialism. Socialism is always the same. It may present to you they may promise you in something different. Like in the past, under Mao or Stalin, they promised you everybody will have house, everybody will have a job. And today's Democrat socialists will promise you everybody will have an iPad, everybody will have a free healthcare. But it's all about this pie in the sky promise. So socialism, boiled down, is about power. It's about a power of control. They will promise you with the equality and the fairness, but in the end, you see the history of socialism, no matter whether in China, Soviet Union, Cuba, Venezuela, no matter in what culture, no matter in what language, no matter in what people practice in socialism, the end result is always the same. You have a small group of people at the top control making decisions for the destiny of millions, and in China's case, billions of people. So the only thing really, equally shared in socialism is misery. So I wrote a book called Confucius Never Said, which gave my family 4 generations of my family story, true life story about living under socialism. The beginning chapter was about my great-grandfather. So I just want to give you a quick recap of his story, that he was a landowner. He earned every inch of that land through his hard work, because he's a wheat farmer. And when the communists took over China in 1949, they implemented a land reform. The so-called reform basically was a systematic movement to take the land from the rightful owners and distribute it to the poor farmers. So my grandfather lost everything he owned, and it's not just land. It took a cattle, the tools, everything he owned. So overnight, he turned from somebody who owned the land, who was able to support himself and his family. Overnight, he turned into this person in poverty, right? And so he had to rely on the government, became like almost like a serf, working for the government as a farm workers in order to earn a very minimal living to support his family. But you would say, oh, at least the poor farmers had, had a good bargain, because now they have land, they can support themselves. But as you know, socialism is always about control, and socialism doesn't believe private property rights. So the whole taking the land from the landowner, distributing to the poor farmer, was really just one stepping stone, eventually for the government to claim the ownership of all the land. And that's what happened in China. So within 5 years after that, the land reform, the government claimed the land ownership to all lands. So even today, land is not privately owned in China. When you buy a house in China, you really buy a 70-year lease of that property. You do not own the minerals. You do not own, you cannot pass down to your next generation, for generation, because you do not own the property. You really buy a lease for 7 decades. And what happens 70 years after that, we don't know. So that's the kind of system, I grew up with. And I become increasingly alarmed that today in the West, including United States, but also happening in Europe, also happening in the United Kingdom, there's this rising radical left movement somehow try to portray socialism is the way to go. And the previous generation, like in China, in Soviet Union, in Cuba, they just didn't do it right. Like somehow this time, the socialists really learned how to do it right. Again, the nature of socialism is evil. It's always about power. It's always about control. Nobody can do it right, because doing it right means causing misery and death to millions of people. So that's where I came from. That's why I have a strong passion to speak out about those issues. I really think that unless we learn from the history, we are bound to repeat it.
It's very interesting, your perspective. And your book, Confucius Never Said, is very interesting because, and very right, because here in Europe, in academia, there's a narrative about China and to legitimize the China Communist Party based on Confucius, saying that China is like this, the Chinese culture is pretty much bound to balance and equilibrium and harmony. So the Chinese Communist Party is the maintainer is the keeper of this equilibrium, this balance. And also, you say that you are passionate about denouncing socialism, communism. But my question is, do you feel that people are open and receptive to listen to you? Do you have the channels to do so, or you are feeling the same tool, the same socialist tool used by this big tech capitalism to silence you and avoid that you speak out about Chinese Communist Party?
Okay, so what you ask is like a lot of questions. I will try to address one by one. First is about the relationship between Confucius and the Chinese Communist Party. So during Mao's Cultural Revolution, it's not a really cultural revolution. It was a cultural destruction between 1966 to 1976. So during this 10-year period, the Chinese Communist parties condemned Confucius as was an evil person, that his ideas about harmony, about the virtue, that actually poisoned the minds of generations of Chinese people. So the Red Guards of Mao actually dug up all Confucius and his generations, later generations' graves, and burned the corpse, destroyed his temples, and also destroyed many Chinese culture as well as precious artifacts. So the communism did not have a good relationship with Confucius. Again, it's about control, right? The communists want you only believe communism / its predecessor, socialism, its close cousin, socialism. They don't want you believing anything else. So anything else, any other ideology or thoughts, philosophies has value, has impact, they will destroy it. But now you see a different relationship. Now you have the Communist Party sponsor Confucius, Institute. Yeah. That is how the communists is very clever. They hijacked they twisted the Confucius philosophy. They did not, so if you go to today's Confucius Institute, you are not going to learn the full spectrum of a Confucius philosophy. Confucius philosophy is not just about harmony. That's a very shallow understanding. He did promote harmony, but for him, harmony can only achieve through virtue, and not just virtue of everybody else, but especially virtue from the leaders. So he said a bad leader is worse than a tiger. So he's promoting virtue. So for him, you can only achieve a harmonious society by having virtue. Everybody, especially the people in leadership, practice virtue. You love the people, you treat them with respect, you care for them. And that's not what happened in today's, Communist Party, as we know, with the crackdown on dissidents, with what's happening in Uyghurs and in Xinjiang, as well as Hong Kong or in Tibet and other regions. So it was not built on, today's communist regime is not built on virtue, but they only want to promote harmony, because harmony to them is stability. And the Communist Party will do anything in the name of achieving stability. So it's a really twisted view of Confucius. That's why I always advocate to people that when you want to talk about the China issues, when you want to talk about, try to understand China better, you really need to go to, try to learn a language and go to the original source. Because if you just go Google the internet, I even noticed this myself, even if you just use Wikipedia, because anybody can enter Wikipedia, you can see that the entries now starting to more and more resemble the talking points of the CCP, and they are everywhere. So don't just go Google it and get a very shallow understanding of it, because that's very misleading. The Communist Party is very good at twisting history and twist culture. So I would encourage more people to actually learn a language and go to the original source to understand that. So that's one thing about the relationship between Confucius and the Chinese Communist Party. And you also ask about, I'm speaking about the socialism, whether that's receptive. I think it depends. It's definitely hard work because we are fighting for promises, right? And socialism's promises is always very attractive. Who doesn't want free housing? Who doesn't want the free healthcare? Exactly. And I know I'm a Christian. I want everybody to be taken care of, right? And so if you compare promises to promises, socialism promise, everybody will have everything. And here, as a free market, people will say, well, if you work hard, if you made out your own effort, you may have this, you may not have this. So if we just based on promise against the promise, it's very difficult. So I always try to tell stories. That's really the purpose when I wrote my first book, Confucius Never Said, because I think a personal story, you humanize the suffering. Because when I tell people, communism is responsible for the life, for taking the life of over 100 million people. Okay, 100 million is such a huge number, right? Most people cannot relate to that, right? It's just something they can't even feel anything when you say 100 million. But when you tell them, say, communism responsible for starving to death of my baby uncle. Communism is responsible for, starving to death for my aunt family, in her family of 5. Communism was responsible for the death of my dad's, literature teacher. Then you humanize those sufferings. And people, even they don't agree with your ideology, they may still want to support ideology, but they can't deny your human sufferings. So I think for all of us, how do we talk about the evil of socialism is important. It's not enough. It's never going to be enough. You just say socialism is evil. We need to denounce it. That's not enough. You have to point out why it's evil and really avoid the statistics. You go for personal, because that's what the left is very good at, right? Because when they say, oh, everybody deserves health care, look so and so, don't you want her to have the health care? I mean, how can you be the cold-blooded person to say, no, I don't want her to have health care? But the turnaround is not to say, oh, she can just go to the charity. No, you can offer a free market solution to say, here's how we can do as a free market supporter, to say individually, we can help her to get healthcare. And how can we make healthcare more affordable so more people can get it, but not by force, by coercion from the government. So how we talk about it is important. But I think even if we are the Sisyphus, we try to push this big boulder uphill and it's keep rolling back, we have to keep doing it. Because we saw, we are students of history. We saw what happened when socialism succeeded. And that's a place none of us wants to be. So at least when we have a fighting chance, we have to keep doing it. So I don't know if I answered your question.
I think really you are a brave woman. I think you are fighting very strong for something that is really complicated. Because if we see around the world, China is inviting in every perspective that you can see. It's incredible how China, over the years, they were working in this moment. And coincident or not, this sanitary crisis they got advantage for it. How you see the future of our humanity? It's possible that we get a balance, and possible to control a little bit this communism or ism currents that are now in the world?
Well, I don't have a crystal ball to forecast the future, but let's get back to China for a second. So when we talk about China, we should make sure that we separate the Chinese people versus the Communist Party. Chinese people are often at the first-hand victim of the Communist Party's brutal policies. So if we only speak China in a broader term, we are condemning the people. They shouldn't be, right? They are the first-hand victims of the regime. So we should always separate the people versus the party. And for the Communist Party, the rise of China and its expansive geopolitical influence today is not by coincidence, it's by conscious design. Because in my new book, which is on the background, I mentioned that the nature, that's one thing many people in the West do not understand. The nature of the Communist Party, just like socialism, is about control, right? And it's very antithetical to our liberal, I'm talking about classical liberal free market beliefs. Our free market classical liberal free market belief is, every individual, we have inalienable rights. Nobody should control us. We make our own effort. We have self-determination to choose our representatives, to choose our political system, to choose how we want to live our lives. That's what we believe. But that's antithetical to the Communist Party and their ideology. Their ideology is always about control. So they are deeply hostile to the liberal world order, to the Western democracies since the founding. That has never changed. The reason it took the Communist Party a while to be able to expand this influence is because they screwed up the economy, as all Communist Party have done in the past. So between 1949 to 1979, China's economy was China was basically at the brink of a bankruptcy because the communism policies ruined China's economy. That's forced the Communist Party to temporarily took a step back to say, you know what, we cannot fight the liberal order. We cannot fight the Western democracy unless we have a stronger economy, unless we have money and power. So that's how they implemented the economic reform. And the economic reform, through the economic reform, China was able to take advantage of the free trade system established by the Western democracy and the law and the regulations to protect the free trade, as well as the openness of the markets in the West. So the Communist Party was able to take advantage of all this that is provided by Western democracy and its liberal world order, took advantage of it and help enrich themselves to become today a powerful authoritarian regime. So now they have plenty of resources, whether it's money, whether it's technology, whether it's military power. Everything in China was developed in a way to help advance the Communist Party's eventual goal, which is to destroy the liberal world order, because they deeply hostile to it, even though they benefited from it, but they don't believe they can survive for long if that order continues. So they're going to destroy the liberal world order and build this new world order that is at least China-centric. So they get to call the shots of tell you what to do. And you can already have a glimpse to see how the Communist Party is going to behave in this new world order. Just look at how it treats Australia. Just look at how it treats, Sweden. Just look at how it treats Norway. It's for, an example with Norway. In Europe, example with Norway is, Norway decided to award the Nobel Peace Prize to China's famous dissident Liu Xiaobo. Chinese embassy made threats, tell them not to do it. And once the Norway actually went ahead, give the award, China punished them from trade, use economic power as a weapon to punish Norway on trade and cancel the trade negotiation. And that's the same tactic China has been used against Sweden, and especially the same tactic China used against Australia. So that's the new world order. You can see it now. I do think that there is hope, because I think for a long period of time, people in the West and the politicians generally believe, there is this hamburger theory, right? If there's a McDonald's, then people can change, regimes can change, people's political will can change, because every McDonald's is the same. It's just basically the idea of the hamburger theory is through trade and the commercial activities, will increase understanding, will eventually change a hostile political regime into something more friendly, more open, and more democratic. Well, that's a failure. That's an illusion, as we know, that's an illusion. So it took two events, I believe, I mentioned in my book, that many people in the West recognize this illusion. One of them is Hong Kong. Because, yes, what happened to the Uyghurs are terrible and it's still ongoing, but it happened in a region that's very remote and is inside China, right? Most of us can only get information from news report. But what's happening in Hong Kong, because it's an international city, there's so many foreigners travel and live there. So what happened in the crackdown, the oppressions in Hong Kong, immediately somebody will record it on their phone, post on social media. So you get the first-hand, information about what's going on a very timely basis. And people are starting to learn, look, the Communist Party has no intention to abide by its, international treaty. And, it promised to keep Hong Kong's freedom for at least 50 years. But now look what happened. We're not even, we're not even 30 years into it. And Hong Kong is already being cracked down. The libraries in Hong Kong, now cancel the books written by the pro-democracy activists. And democratically elected legislators are now being replaced by, pro-Beijing, loyalists, and those who have been persecuted. The people who led protests now have legally protests have been persecuted, and now they have this national security law. You can't even tweet anything. You can't say anything that's critical or even remotely support the Hong Kong's pro-democracy movement. And not only they're going to persecute you in Hong Kong, like people like you and I, we think we're safe outside of Hong Kong. We're not. The national security law gives the Communist Party power, at least their self-designated power, to persecute anyone around the world. So like the activity we're doing now is against the national security law.
Yeah, of course.
That's how expensive the control is. So that's one thing, what's happening in Hong Kong. Another thing is the coronavirus, right? The pandemic. And more and more, we learned that the pandemic was something originated in China that could have been controlled if the Chinese government did not suppress dissenting voices, if they did not suppress the whistleblowers, the whistleblowers from December 31st, 2019, we all learned what happened back then. This is a controllable situation. I'm not just saying that. There's a study by the Southampton University. They did a study to show how the pandemic could be controlled. Basically, based on their analysis, which I cited in my book, they said that if the Chinese Communist Party would let the world, let all of us know 3 weeks in advance, the pandemic would have been controlled by 90%. There would be no global pandemic. It will be an outbreak in China, but there would be no global pandemic. So I think those informations has really turned a lot of people turn sour against the Chinese Communist Party. That's why last year, the worldwide public opinion poll about China, you see the Chinese leader and the China's reputation has dropped 70%. So I think at least from the public opinion standpoint, Hong Kong and the coronavirus are two wake-up calls for the public to say, you know what, this is a regime we don't want to deal with. Now, the challenge is whether the elites in our country, in your country, in my country, have the same wake, also be waking up, also have recognition. I don't think they do. They either have not have that wake up call yet, or they are so short-sighted. They want to keep engaging the commercial interest to make as much money as they can before everything go bad. So I think that our elites class is really the biggest barrier to actually push back, on the Communist Party.
Yes, that's the origin of my skepticism. I'm very skeptical because I don't think, I'm seeing the opposite signs. What I'm seeing is the European leaders, the so-called international community leaders, and even in the United States, leaders kind of whitewashing Chinese Communist Party. The WHO is aligning with Chinese interests, Chinese Communist Party interests. The Biden administration, and I would like to hear from you about this. I think the Biden administration made a huge mistake in rejoining the WHO before any safeguards, before any accountability, before demanding any accountability from the way this international organization handle the pandemics and especially handle the relation with China. We are seeing clearly that the leverage is on Chinese Communist Party, not in the international community, because the international community is dominated now by the Chinese Communist Party. I think the leverage, the institutional, the power mechanisms are favoring the Chinese Communist Party and not the other way around. When you say, your argument is very interesting and is very impressive, that McDonald's would change the Chinese Communist Party and the Chinese regime. But what happened was the other way around. Chinese Communist Party transform McDonald's and transform the big tech capitalism. Twitter, Facebook are more like the Chinese Communist Party and the national security law than the Chinese Communist Party is becoming like the free world, the Western free liberal societies.
Right. Actually, we're not that far off. Like I said, public opinion, I think people like you and I and Rosanna, that we recognize who are we dealing with, but it's the people who are elites, who are actually in charge of our countries. They choose to go the other way. And so let me unpack what you just said. First of all, yes, there's the cost of challenging the Chinese Communist Party is extremely high. You know, if you're a business, you know, you challenge the Chinese Communist Party, even for small offense, like if you call Taiwan a country, you know, China could cut off the market access for you. So for business individually, the cost is very high. And for some countries, like as I mentioned earlier, Australia is a perfect example that for challenging China, they get punished by, you know, economic means, and also they get condemned every day by China's, you know, state media and, you know, diplomats. You know, they were called as a gum stuck on China, the bottom of China's shoes. You know, those very insulting words. So yes, so even for individual countries challenging China, the cost is very, very high. What's happening is, number one, is there's not much leadership today. There's not much leadership, the willingness to challenge China. So let's go back to Biden's predecessor, you know, Donald Trump. You know, Trump, he has many personal flaws, and not all his policies were good. We know that. But when it comes to China, his policies were very strong. He made a 180-degree turn compared to all his predecessors, and he's willing to take that leadership for the United States to confronting China on human rights issues, on Hong Kong, and in the South China Sea. And, you know, he's the first administration and only country in the world called the Uyghurs persecution is a genocide. And United States was also the first country and the only country sanctioned senior Chinese Communist Party officials, right? And even though the European, the more refined, the Merkels and the Macrons, you know, they didn't, even though they didn't like Trump, you know, even Boris Johnson in the United Kingdom, you know, we're supposed to be the closest allies. Even the Boris Johnson, you know, have a hard time to say they like Trump or they want to follow him. But in terms of policies, especially look at the United Kingdom, prior to the coronavirus, the pandemic, United Kingdom insists, despite the United States objection, United Kingdom insists it must hire China's telecom Huawei to build a 5G network in United Kingdom. And the Trump administration warned him not to do that because they said you're going to subject your national security to a very high risk. And if you go ahead to do so, we're going to stop sharing intelligence with you because we don't feel it's, you know, it's safe. Even with all the threats, Johnson was going, you know, he was going to push this ahead no matter what, you know, because Huawei is cheap. Right, compared to other European competitors, you know, they offer a very good price. So, but last year, because of the coronavirus, in May, the Johnson administration made the decision that they're not going to include Huawei in the network. And for that, they get punished, you know, by, you know, the China makes a threat to Hong Kong Shanghai Bank, which is a based bank, and China also, the Chinese Communist Party also stopped recognizing the Hong Kongers who have a British, you know, national passport or birth certificate or whatever. So the United Kingdom is being punished, but if not for the United States leadership, none of those countries would want to follow, right? It's just like you go into a street fighting, you know, you only if, you know, when you face a evil gang, only if you're standing next to Bruce Lee, maybe you're willing to fight. If there's nobody's leading, right? If there's nobody's leading, you don't want to do it. You know, why should I suffer, right? And that's the same thing applied to international politics too. And unfortunately, you know, now we have an administration that I actually just wrote an article today at the Federalist. I talk about how Biden's foreign policy is really Obama 2.0. It's about appeasement. It's about, use lofty rhetoric, but not backed by any real tough actions. Use wishful thinkings, a mistaken wishful thinkings as sound policies. And that's, unfortunately, that's this administration is keep doing. You're right. We should never rejoin WHO unless we demand, change. And international organizations like WHO are currently under the control of the Communist Party. And also, when Biden's emphasis, when Biden was asked during his campaign, asked what his foreign policy, he always gave one word answer. Oh, I work with allies. I work with allies. But the thing is, the allies is waiting for United States leadership. When they say he's a tough leader, he's not going to lead, they all went their own ways. Look at what happened in EU, right? The EU signed a huge investment agreement with China. And despite all the revelations, what happened in Uyghur, for the Uyghur Muslim in Xinjiang, and the EU went ahead, signed this huge investment deal with China even before Biden took office, because they know he's not going to stand up. If he's not going to go stand up against the Communist Party, then everybody went their own ways, and that is unfortunate. What I hope is, at least in the Western democracy, right? I hope the politicians do want to follow the public opinions, even sometimes they don't want to, but eventually they want the votes, they want to remain in power. So what I'm hoping is the public will be educated enough, through something, my book, and through, watching videos like this, the public will be educated enough. Then they will demand their politician, their elites, starting to change their behavior, change their policies in response to public demand. I think that's the only way. The change is not going to naturally come from the top.
No.
That's for that's for sure.
And for that reason, because it's our purpose as well, let's talk about your book. It says like a title, Backlash. Talk about what was your purpose to write down about this topic that is very confrontational and very direct about your point about what is going on with China's aggression.
Right. So my purpose is actually not to be confrontational. I wrote this book, number one, because I had the time. We all couldn't go anywhere last year for almost the entire year, and I hate wasting time. And secondly, I'm frustrated. I'm really frustrated. So I've been writing a lot of articles last couple of years, but articles, in today's digital media, it has a very short shelf life, and also you have a limited space of how much you can say. As I mentioned, that everything comes when every topic related to China is complicated. You need the context, especially the historical context, to understand what this issue is really about. And so I decided to write a book. I believe in a book format, it will give me more room to expand on the same topic as I write about before, but give me more room to put the historical context, next to it. So this book covered all the contemporary issues related to China, the domestic persecution of the Uyghurs, the Christians, and this mass surveillance system in China, and then what's happening in Hong Kong and its struggle with Taiwan, as well as what's happening in South China Sea. And then also the third half of the book also talk about the Chinese government's foreign infiltrations into the Western democracies, like the Confucius Institute, like the Southern Talent programs, and some other things that we should be aware of. And then the final section was about the coronavirus. That was just very timely. Just something kind of wrap everything up. So the book is really two sections. The first part is about aggression, a very long aggression. But in the end, I did talk about the signs, signs of a backlash. Basically, backlash means that there's a global awakening, and some pushback. Not a big wave yet, but some pushback. I finished writing this book. This book was published right after the election, the U.S. election, but I finished writing it before the U.S. election, so I didn't know the election results when I finished writing this book. So I was hopeful back then that the strategy, the U.S. strategy, the U.S. led the restraint or confrontation probably would continue, but I didn't know, right? And I didn't know that we're gonna have a 180 change of policy back to the same old song and dance again. So that part I did not, I couldn't anticipate, because I couldn't keep writing a book and never publish, just keep updating with current events. But I think there's also, so the main purpose of the book is really educational. I hope people will read it as learn about issues and learn how to understand those contemporary issues through an unfiltered lens, right? So get out of all those noises and get through unfiltered lens to really understand all those issues, one by one. What's the good way to understand it? And then I believe only once we truly understand it, then we can formulate the right strategies to how to deal with it. And also, I think that there's also one thing I haven't had a chance to touch on is in my book, actually towards the beginning of the book, I mentioned why the Chinese Communist Party is so aggressively pushing its geopolitical expansion. So that's one thing many people in the West, including their elites, do not recognize. Domestically, China actually facing a lot of challenges itself. The population is a big challenge. The aging population is a big challenge because the one-child policy, China's population is aging faster, and also it's losing the working age population faster than expected, right? And so, China's in the last 30 years, China's huge number of working age population was one of the main engines of growth for China's economy. And you already see that China's economic growth has significantly slowed down, and it's going to keep slowing down with this population bomb that's happening. Another big challenge is the environmental issues. So as the Chinese people become richer and they demand the quality of life, and the last 30 years of China's economic growth largely comes at the expense of environmental pollution. Very few places in China now today have available drinking, quality drinking water, safe drinking water, and even the airs, even the capital city is very polluted. So, and the Chinese government recognized the environmental issue actually has become a great social issue, will hurt their social stability. So the reason I put it at the beginning of the page, not only try to explain what's behind the scene of this aggressive push right now, because I think they didn't want to wait. If they waited when all this problem domestically bubble up, then they're going to be busy to dealing with that, right? And also all this outward aggressive expansion is also a way for them to address domestic issues, right? Because with the aging population, you're losing workers, so you want the workers from other countries, and also you keep producing those you have to keep your factories keep running, but you have a saturated market at home. There's only so many steels company can buy. There's only so many houses you can build. Where do they go? Well, they through the Belt and Road program, they send them out to other countries, to make turn other countries into markets. So all this is why you have to understand all the domestic issues to understand why there's such aggressiveness to pushing outside. And this also gave us hope that China is not invincible. The Communist Party is not invincible. They're facing a lot of challenges too. And there may be also room for cooperation if we both play our cards right. But first and foremost, we really need to recognize who are we dealing with and what's their ultimate goal is. Unless we recognize that, we'll never come up with the right strategy to deal with it.
Yeah. But that's even more surprising because we know that China Communist Party is weakening day after day, and the international community and the political leaders in the West try to accommodate, try to not facing during the most difficult time for the Chinese Communist Party. It's like you have the enemy, like we are, if we were Bruce Lee, our opponent is on the floor, and we say, no, get up, right? So, and there's a story that I would like to share with Ellen, and with this one I give to Roxana. That you may write in the second edition of this great book of yours, that what you described is happening and has happened in Portugal and in Spain.
Same, yeah.
Well, 100%. It's like I was reading the book and was, whoa, this is Portugal. This happened in Portugal. And there was an episode last August that the Chinese Communist Party wants to control the Portuguese government in order to get two accents. One is the military base of Lages in Azores, which is strategically in terms of military power, and then the seaport of Sines. Why? Because seaport of Sines is the interconnection between the two sides of the world, and the corridor for the One Belt, One Road project. And President Trump sent this message to the Portuguese government: over my dead body, over our dead body, like this, over our dead body. And the Portuguese government silence for a bit, but then the U.S. ambassador nominated by President Trump, Mr. George Glass, said to the Portuguese government that Portugal had to choose between the United States, the free world, or China Communist Party. And if they decided to choose for the Chinese Communist Party, what would happen was that the United States would interrupt the intelligence sharing with Portugal. And also the NATO, because we have here a command of NATO, and this command would be changed for another country, which offer better conditions of security vis-a-vis Chinese Communist Party. And the Chinese Communist Party set up with the Confucius Institute, with some journalists, with one major Portuguese newspaper, a campaign attacking personally the ambassador of the United States here in Lisbon. A personal attack on the ambassador, and was something I never seen before. And so what we had was the Chinese Communist Party apparatus in Portugal aligned with the Portuguese government apparatus to isolate the United States and steering up the Chinese Communist Party. And Portugal is having the European Union presidency, and the speech, the tone against China is very soft, very friendly, which means that the Chinese Communist Party has some governments in captivity. The governments are captured by the Chinese Communist Party. And so I was reading your book and was like, whoa, that's what is happening here.
For the last question, Helen, we would like that you share a little bit your thoughts about Biden administration and what will be with all these policies changes, but especially with this relation with the countries that are socialism right now, because Biden is showing that he wants to be close with them. So what is your expectation about your country? Because you are living there. It's different for us that we can comment about that, but you are living there and you are in the first person facing all these problems.
Right. So our Democrat Party has been captured by the socialists, and they're definitely the radical left wing in the Democrat Party have the control of the party, and they are really calling the shots. So Biden was supposed to be a moderate, candidate. That's how he, became elected. But it turns out that just based on people he appointed, and impose, as well as his policy approach right now, all the executive orders he signed, that he's nothing but moderate. And he also came in with all this talk about the unity, but it seems like all his policies is very one-sided. And so I'm not very optimistic about him and his government, the policy that he's advocate. So I'm not surprised that the United States government under the Biden administration will be much less harsh and more friendly with like Venezuela dictators and with all the socialist countries, and just generally soft to all dictatorships. You look at what's happening with the relationship with Iran, right? I mean, the day after Iran-backed militant, send rockets to U.S. military base in Iraq, instead of condemning the activities, the Biden administration actually handed out olive branch, just like just like you just mentioned, that when your opponent was down on the ground, instead of you just lift them up, come on, here, I'll lift you up. And so the Biden administration, actually the day after the attack, the Biden administration told the UN, we're gonna rescinding all the sanctions that imposed by the Trump administration, and also made known on social media that, we're really eager to talk to the Iranian government. If they invite us, we'll be there. So and now Iran is playing the hard to get, this. Iran now is playing as it's the hottest girl in the town. They say, I don't want to date you. I'm not gonna go out with you unless you meet all my demands. You have to lift all the sanctions. Yeah. You cannot set any conditions, right? Let's just return to the old bad deal, but good for me, kind of thing. So those are concerning. And another concerning trend in the United States is this growing intolerance, the cancel culture, the growing intolerance of different opinions, different ideas. When I say different, and usually it's the conservative ideas and the opinions that's being being canceled, being canceled. So that's really challenging. But my hope is something I was Google last night trying to find a good quote from Winston Churchill that, for one of my articles. And Winston Churchill, one of his famous comment about the United States is, Americans will always do the right thing after they tried everything else, right? so my hope is, my hope is after our country in the next 4 years is definitely going to shift left and very left. And they're gonna, the Biden administration going to implement the policies that will have disastrous effect domestically and internationally. But my hope is after that, we'll find our way back, to the middle. We in the past we always able to do that. My hope is we'll continue to be able to do that. And also in the United States now, there's a movement among conservatives that we recognize our media, the big tech, and our government are almost all unanimously in control by the left, right? So now, but we are entrepreneurial. I'm an entrepreneur myself. We're entrepreneurial. We believe in free markets. So there is a lot of call to actions from a conservative base to say we need to build our own infrastructures. We need to build alternatives. Tech companies. We need to build different gateway. Social media. There are things we need to build to make sure that we don't just get canceled and then totally lose our voices, because we believe, dissenting opinions, the diversity of ideas is important. So I think that the harsher the environment is, the more this desire to basically push back to find a new solution. And that's really the American way. That's why I love this country so much, that, it's a country built on, fearless determination, that the more you punch the Americans harder, the more we're gonna bounce back higher. So that's what keep me going, is this hope that we will find new ways to do the right thing eventually.
Yeah, it's admirable, your passion, Helen. Really, I hear you and I think, oh my God, I hope all your words come true very soon, because when I see the world that is, oh my God, is really a messed up sometimes, we need a leader like you. So we really hope that you can be leading this in the future, this philosophy, this kind of thoughts that really we need that. The last word.
I'm feeling more optimistic right now. After listening to Helen, I'm feeling less skeptical and more optimistic about the future.
Your passion, really, you transfer to us in a good way. So I'm really happy that you had this time to share with us all your feelings, all your thoughts, and of course your opinion about what is happening with this China, I don't know how to say, invasion of China philosophy.
Domination, control.
Domination is a good word. Yeah.
Domination, yeah, is the perfect concept. So thank you very much. Really, it was a pleasure to talk with you.